We're living in a moment where disagreement is treated like a moral failure and where outrage gets rewarded more than understanding. Today's conversation is about what it looks like when people slow things down, sit across from one another, and choose dialogue over caricature. My guest is Bill Woodson, founder of Conversations Across the Aisle, and we're talking about what actually helps communities function when politics gets hard. Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate The Hate podcast. I'm your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. The Derate The Hate podcast is proudly produced in collaboration with Braver Angels, America's largest grassroots, cross-partisan organization working towards civic renewal. This podcast amplifies the mission that we share to foster a more respectful and united America where civic friendship thrives even when we disagree. Each week, through the power of story, conversation, and connection with incredible guests, we work to build bridges instead of barriers. Not to change minds on the issues, but to change how we see one another when we differ. Because, friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, share it with a friend, and visit braverangels.org to learn how you can get involved in the movement to bridge the partisan divide. Friends, I am so incredibly grateful that you have joined me for another powerful Derate the Hate episode. So let's get to it. My guest today is Bill Woodson, founder of CATA Project, Conversations Across the Aisle, a Sarasota-based effort focused on bringing people with very different political views into real, facilitated conversations. Bill didn't come to this work through ideology. He came to it through experience. Public service, higher education, community policing research, and a personal life shaped by immigration, disability, and trauma all inform how he thinks about dialogue and civic responsibility. In this conversation, we talk about why polarization feels so corrosive at the community level, why debate often makes things worse instead of better, and what happens when people are given a space to be heard without being reduced to a political stereotype. This isn't about fixing the country in one conversation. It's about what actually happens when neighbors are trying to live together in a divided time. Let's get to it with my friend Bill Woodson. Here we go. Bill Woodson, thank you for joining me on the Derate the Hate podcast. Good to see you again today.
Good to see you, Wilk.
Yeah, it's always good to talk to a fellow Braver Angel. And Bill, I met you recently on a Braver Network call that I believe, I don't know if I was speaking there or if we were just on a common call, but it was good to connect with you, and I started looking at the work that you've been doing with the CATA Project. And for people who aren't aware, Conversations Across the Aisle is a part of our Braver Network, and got to learn a little bit about that, Bill, and wanted to learn a lot more. So that's why I asked you to join me here today. So grateful for it. And yeah,
happy to share.
Yeah, let's kind of get into one of the things that I like to do right away is kind of pick people's brain as to, what made them decide to get into this bridge building space. There's a lot of different organizations doing a lot of different things in this space, and you've got your own thing with the Conversations Across the Aisle. So Bill, tell me what it was and what in your story kind of led you to start CATA.
Absolutely. So, and I like that the description of the business of being in bridge building spaces, because I often talk about the fact that there's this network of like-minded organizations, and I'm excited to be a part of that and know that what's firing up my interest is also sparking up for people around the country and different organizations. But the idea for CATA started back in the end of 2022. I was wrapping up my career and I thought heading towards retirement from higher education. I was an administrator at New College of Florida, which is based here in Sarasota, and had been thinking about some of the experiences I'd had over the years and kind of idealizing, well, I really like this aspect of one program I'd heard about or participated in, really like that aspect, and thinking if we could match these things together, I think it could be really a positive, just like we're all experiencing this, incredibly deep polarization that's happening, which really frustrated me because I've always been someone who has enjoyed picking the brains of people who are well-informed and thoughtful and have a different point of view, a different perspective than my own. I've always been curious personally as to how they get there. So one of the experiences that I had seen and admired and enjoyed being a part of is something called the Sunday Forum. It's hosted by the Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota. They would bring in subject matter experts who typically were retirees. Sarasota has a lot of really smart, successful folks who've ended their careers and now they're enjoying the Florida sunshine, but they've got deep knowledge in different areas. So people who had expertise on environmental issues or housing policy or this type of thing, that type of thing, the war in Gaza, whatever the topic might be, there's somebody who has a lot of knowledge and would be sharing it with this group. I loved that opportunity to learn from these folks. I was frustrated because the space is a very, very progressive space. And I was often curious, why, how would a person who's coming from a conservative perspective respond to this information that we're all receiving? Because I just would like to have heard what they had to say about it. I would have liked to have had more opportunity for back and forth with my peers in the room, not just asking questions of the subject matter expert at the front of the room. And another experience that informed my interest and informed the design of conversations across the aisle was something called Marnita's Table. Marnita's based up in Minneapolis, where I used to live before coming to Sarasota. She has a format that is done over dinner, and it would involve bringing people together who are typically seen as being on the opposite side of an issue to collaborate together to explore solutions to issues. The particular program that I attended was basically Black youth and local law enforcement, two groups that don't have a great warm history with each other, but coming together to talk about how to keep communities safer and start with a meal. And then we get into conversation, and and I said, I really like this. I really like, and the fact that we were coming together as peers, even though these were not necessarily a pre-existing positive relationship, but to really explore together solutions and to learn from each other. So, and there was a third inspiration, and that inspiration was something called The Miracle on the Key. Longboat Key is a very popular sort of high-end retirement neighborhood on a barrier island, and they have a very active Longboat Key Democrats Club and Longboat Key Republicans Club. And they created this initiative called Miracle on the Key, and they sent a delegation from those two different clubs with a professional facilitator to just explore issues together. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. I asked about joining it, and they said, well, it's a closed group. We just have these five. It's not even the entire Democrat club and Republican club. It's this delegation of like 5 and 5 from each side, and we don't really have any plans to expand it. And I was like, there needs to be something like this that everybody could participate in. And so I got together got scared of a few volunteers, and in January of 2023, we started brainstorming what might a vision look like? How could we make that vision a reality? And in October of 23, we had our first workshop. Our first discussion topic was education. Is it still a public good, and why does it matter? And it went very, very well. We were very concerned about could we make a safe that would be safe and respectful as well as authentic and candid? And we spent 9 months. Much of that time was just figuring out how do we do that? Each table has a facilitator. We developed a training protocol for training our facilitators. We thought about criteria for who we would invite. We did a lot of work, which almost surprised us how robust the design turned out to be. That first event went well. We've now done 7 of these workshops. They
Nice.
last about 3 hours a piece. People initially go, 3 hours? That seems so long. We have to kick them out at the end because they're having such a great experience.
Right.
They're really enjoying the exchange. And there was also a lot of concern. Is this going to be safe? Are people going to be respectful? Am I going to get attacked because I'm thinking differently about this thing? And they're leaving with a really positive feeling about their experience. And
Very nice.
And it's been really exciting to have an idea and have it come to fruition. And it's actually through doing research to create this design for this program is how I heard about Braver Angels. And
yeah, and I'm sure because Braver Angels has been, we've been doing this since, not me personally, but Braver Angels as an organization, started in 2016 during the first Trump election with Hillary Clinton, and where it brought together the Trump supporters, 10 Trump supporters, 10 Clinton supporters for a weekend of workshops and things like that. And yeah, I think it's amazing. I always love to hear about the inspiration of people and why they did these things. A lot of those always come back to, in some way, shape, or form, come back to Braver Angels. Oh, I heard about this organization, Braver Angels. I wanted to do something like that in my area, and maybe at the time there wasn't something there. But one of the things, this is what really jazzes me up, Bill, is hearing other, like about these things like Marnita's table here. I mean, I live outside of Minneapolis here. I know my Braver Angels colleague, Dr. Bill Doherty from the U of M, he and one of the founders of Braver Angels, he does a thing with young urban youth and law enforcement in the cities here too. But I hadn't heard of Marnita's table, and that's fantastic. And that, and then the Miracle on the Key, another thing that and this is why this thing jazzes me up, is because when I go around the country and doing talks or have these different sessions with people around the country and things like that, I always hear from people, I had no idea that the the depolarization space was a thing, or I didn't know there were other people out there that felt the same way that I did about these toxic polarizing issues, and I just wish there was something in my area or a way that I could get involved and whatever. And I'm like, I'm always amazed because there's so many of them. I heard recently, Bill, that there's like 11,000 different bridging things around the country. It's amazing.
that is amazing.
I would, yeah, and some of them are just small one person organizations. Some of them are like you, or have a handful of volunteers. Braver Angels, obviously, is the largest grassroots, cross-partisan, volunteer-led organizations in the country with more 15,000 plus members right now. The Braver network that we've got going, of which you're a part now, or your organization is a part. Another very exciting thing that we've got going, bringing together a lot of these other bridging organizations, that do different things, kind of going in the same direction, rowing in the same direction, just in a different lane. But the thing about that is, and this is where I want this to go, because this is what people, there's a lot of people out there right now that kind of feel hopeless, Bill. They feel they've lost their power to make a difference. They feel hopeless because they see all the doom and gloom in the media and whatever. But talk about, because this is what made me think of this. Talk about that feeling that these people, you said you got to kick them out after a 3-hour workshop. What other kind of 3-hour workshop are people going to be, just they want to keep on going, right? Not very many. But the power that has on a person's, they start to rebuild that sense of agency. They get that feeling that we can get something done. They're working with people that they probably didn't agree with on a particular thing. But now that they're having this constructive dialogue, talk about how you get there.
Yeah. It's funny because I like what you're saying in terms of the giving people hope and giving them a sense that maybe there's a more positive way to move forward. Making people feel better has actually not been high on our list of priorities, but I do think it's a wonderful impact and consequence of what we're doing. What I talk about in terms of the why, the WIFM, and the reason for being for CATA is that this toxic moment in our country's history where it's not just that you disagree with your neighbor because they voted for a different person in the last election, but you're kind of you're disgust. You don't think that people who voted for the other party, they're not good people. This is the vibe that we're in right now, and you combine that with these information silos that we are now pigeonholed into, where you can't even understand how a reasonable, rational person could even have this opposing opinion about something. It's toxic. It's degrading the quality of our sense of community, and I don't think it's sustainable. So
Nope.
I see this effort, what we're trying to do with CATA, what Brave for Angels is trying to do, is really being not just a feel good, but something that's kind of essential for the restoring and the continued health of our nation. It has to happen at the community level,
That's
but
right.
it's something that I feel really could have national impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely it can. And that's what I talk about. That's one of the things that I've been talking about since the inception of the Derate The Hate podcast is personal accountability and how we as an individual, the mission statement for the Derate The Hate podcast has always been bettering the world one attitude at a time. Attitude is not a collective thing. That's something that each one of us has, and each one of us has the power within ourselves to adjust our own attitude.
That's right.
And before I started this podcast, Bill, I went on a long personal journey to adjust my own attitude. And now I try to take those skills and the stories that I've developed over the years and the skills that I've developed over the years to help other people adjust their attitudes. But the thing that it comes back to is that individual accountability, that personal responsibility. I have the ability to choose my response to things outside of my control. And I want to dive into something you said there, right? People say, well, my neighbor voted this way, and I can't even imagine how somebody of, a reasonable person could vote that way. So this person must not be reasonable, or this person must be this awful person because if they weren't awful, they wouldn't have voted the way that they voted. But, one of the things that I was on a call last night with the Braver Angels National Ambassador, John Wood, good friend of mine, John Wood Jr., and he talks about Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., the agape love concept, and how those men had the innate ability to separate the person from the positions that person holds.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are always going to be no. Let's not make any bones about it. There are evil people out there, and there are really bad people in the world.
Absolutely.
But there are also very good people that can make bad decisions. There are also good people that hold bad positions on a particular thing. And one of the things that I talk a lot about is finding our shared humanity.
Yes.
And if we get to a position that we can see the human being before we pigeonhole them based on the positions that they hold, how much does that change the dynamic of that interaction, Bill?
I mean, it changes everything, and I think it's huge. I love your reflection on how you had to think about, depolarizing yourself, getting yourself out of that binary feeling. I know that for myself, as I've taken on this role, that people are starting, in the Sarasota community are starting to associate my personal name with conversations across the aisle. And I'm fairly active on social media. And it's been important for me to really think about, as I'm responding to other people's posts or as I'm challenging someone, well, how am I challenging them? Because I feel like I need to represent the brand that CATA has become. And it is true. Our society just has now applauds, like the more antagonistic, the more pointed, the rebuttal, the more we applaud, the more clicks it gets, the more it's amplified. And a reasoned response is like, it's not fashionable. It's not cool. And we've got to shift that, because people aren't going to listen. They're not going to take in new information. They're not going to grow if it's presented in the form of a slap in the face and, an assertion that, oh, well, you're stupid because you think this way and you don't know this and that. There's ways that we can respond that are far more useful, just as informative. It doesn't mean you're agreeing. It doesn't mean you're soft pedaling it. You're saying, no, I heard you say this and I heard you, but here's where I've got different facts and here's what I'm looking at, or I have a different set of priorities. And what is that about? So let's talk it through. That's how people are going to come to consensus. That's how people are going to grow.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and this is where we as a society, I had a hard time saying that for some reason. As a society, need to start thinking about a serious paradigm shift, right? Acknowledgement is not necessarily agreement, but in order to acknowledge what somebody's saying, I have to listen to them with intention. And I want to go back to, I want to kind of accentuate something that you said there, Bill, and say it in a bit of a different way. Is, that slap in the face or that snarky comment isn't going to change somebody's mind. I say, and it's loosely based on a Martin Luther King quote, but I say you cannot hate somebody into believing what you believe. Martin Luther King said it beautifully back in the day. He said, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. So I've kind of taken that and I say, you cannot hate somebody into believing what you believe. It's just not going to happen. So, you have to decide, are you going to be part of the solution or are you going to be part of the problem? Because if you're going to engage in that certain way online with people you don't know about things that they either or you don't know enough about, but you do know how to fight with them online in some keyboard warrior fashion, you're not going to change their mind. They're not going to change your mind. You guys are wasting powerful energy accomplishing nothing. You're bigger, So we as a people need to be better than that. We need to work together. We need to understand, like Stephen Covey said back in the day, seek first to understand, seek first to understand and then to be understood.
You're hitting all my favorite quotes, Wilk.
What's that?
You're hitting all my favorite quotes.
Well, there's some of my favorite quotes too, Bill. When I was on that journey, I don't know how many books. I mean, I definitely read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People over and over and over again. But yeah, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and then Mindset. There's no better mindset book than Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning and things like that. But you know what? These things, and I pull quotes out of these all the time. But these books are timeless classics because you know what? The human condition is the same. It was the same since humans have been around. It's just a matter of, are we going to allow ourselves to fall victim to the worst part of our nature, or are we going to appeal to the better angels of our nature? And that's really what it comes down to. Is, are we going to allow ourselves to be the worst example of humanity, or are we going to try and be the best part of humanity? And that's, when you're talking about having conversations across the aisle, or we're doing the workshops, the countless, different types of workshops that we have at Braver Angels, or we another organization that I'm a big part of as a board of advisors is the Pro-Human Foundation, and focusing on our shared humanity, unique individuals that recognize that we have a shared humanity. Mm-hmm. When we interact with somebody, hate doesn't get the work done, Bill. Hate's not, and it never has, and it never will get the work done. But focusing on the why. Why do people believe what they believe? Not just what they believe. And don't reduce somebody to just that few things that you guys disagree on. So dive into that a little bit, because
Absolutely.
when we reduce somebody to those things that we disagree with, there's a whole lot we're missing.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, I give the conversations across the aisle props because there's something that we do that's a little different from how a lot of the programming happens at Braver Angels that I'm rather proud of, because I think it's an important way to both differentiate ourselves from what's a very successful and high impact model with, well, so why does CATA even exist since Braver Angels is already there? And
Sure.
I would say it's this, that a lot of the content delivery for Braver Angels is in the form of a debate. And if you're putting things in the framework of a debate, you've got winners and losers. And your focus is no longer on, you can lose focus. I mean, obviously, in a Braver Angels debate, people are speaking their truth because they think this is an important perspective. But you can get caught up in, how do I win this argument? As opposed to really staying focused on, well, what is the truth?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the perspective of the other side? How did they get there? Because if I understand what I might find out that, you know what, we're disagreeing, but our disagreement is not, yay big. It's just a little bit of disagreement, and it's maybe just about the priorities as opposed to about whether immigrants are good to have or bad to have. Because you start at that kind of a level, and you're not going to get anywhere.
No.
But when you start to recognize, and immigration's a nice example where, okay, we need to have, there's a value to welcoming immigrants into the country. There
Mm-hmm.
needs to be a proper vetting. There needs to be a process. People should be encouraged to follow the process. Those are statements that everybody agrees with. I don't know anybody who doesn't find that those are reasonable perspectives. Now the question is, well, what are we disagreeing about? Well, maybe your priority is adherence to the current law. Maybe my priority is respect for people's humanity. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how you could be a reasonable person. You just have a different set of priorities that are not my priorities, but I can understand them. I can respect them. And maybe we can find a path forward that honors my priorities, but also honors your priorities. You only get there if you're focusing on surfacing the truth and moving away from trying to win or lose an argument.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, when we start to think about the misperceptions that people have of each other on either side of the aisle, and you start to focus just on those things that you disagree on, you start to lose sight of all those points of agreement that you have along the way. The immigration example, Bill, is a phenomenal one, because, well, kind of going back to Braver Angel, but we have the new Citizens Commission on Immigration that we started in 2024, and it is turned into an incredible thing. But just the number of things, and there's stuff going on there now with the Problem Solvers Caucus in DC now, and the number of points of agreement would just baffle the American public. When you break it down to all the different things that the American public actually agree on, instead of focusing on the few things that they very much disagree on, it changes the dynamic of the conversation. And
It's a
to your point,
disagreement, and it's also the character, making a caricature of the other person's perspective.
it
Oh,
does.
you just want open borders. Oh, you just want to put kids in cages. And you boil them down to these absolutes that are also absurdities. Of course, you can't make any progress forward.
Absolutes based on oversimplification. That is one of the biggest problems we have in getting things done in this country. And I think that comes along with the ugly nature of social media and 24-hour news cycles and things like that, is the oversimplification that just drives misperceptions and the caricature. That's a perfect way to sum it up, Bill, is that caricature nature of the position, whether it be the position that's held, by the loudest voices on the right, or the caricature nature of the loudest voices on the left. If you boil that down and act as if that caricature nature or that caricature position is the position of the larger body, you don't get anywhere.
And that's
The
exactly what
conversation
happens.
stalls. It just stops.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happens. And frankly, I think we're being played by our politicians on the left or the right, because their focus clearly, in my mind, at least it's clear, they're focused on getting reelected.
Oh yeah.
And that focus gets fed by getting people fired up and angry so that they make sure they go to the polls. And
Yep.
it's not nurtured by understanding that the other side has some important points that should be heard, and that there should be a search for meeting in the middle, and for dialogue, for compromise, and for drawing people together, embracing the fact that they have different opinions, maybe different information, maybe different priorities, and then seeking commonality that can be discerned if you're actually listening, as opposed to trying to figure out how to win the argument.
That's so right. Yeah, it does, and I call it fog. It's fear, outrage, and grievance. So those outrage entrepreneurs in our social media, the outrage machine, the outrage culture that's driven through our mainstream media and politicians. It's that fear, outrage, and grievance that keeps people fired up. It keeps them clicking. It keeps them scrolling. But it does not foster a healthy civic culture.
And Wilk, I'll tell you what else. That right now, because the media amplifies those extreme positions, we only get to hear from the extremists. Mm-hmm. And people who are in the middle, people who do have curiosity, who are willing to listen to a conversation, they don't have a space. Because right. and I think that one of the key values of initiatives like Braver Angels, like Conversations Across the Aisle, is that it creates a space where people can find that being thoughtful and reasoned actually has value and actually can be embraced. I don't know how we amplify that to compete with the social media outrage machine, but I think that's the next mountain that we should collectively try to tackle.
That is the mountain that we are collectively trying to tackle, with organizations like CATA, joining the Braver Network. The biggest message that we can convey here, Bill, is making sure that people know that they're not alone. They are empowered to do great things. It starts with each of us as an individual. Kind of recapping our conversation here, is every individual has that ability to make things happen, and there is a community out there for people. Like I said, there's a lot of organizations doing this, but you know what? Braver Angels is nationwide. CATA is got aspirations of becoming a nationwide organization. There's organizations out there, whether they're small or large, like Braver Angels. Hopefully they all come, if they decide to be part of one of the smaller ones, I certainly hope they're part of the Braver Network. But the reality is there's a community of people out there, Bill, coming together to practice courageous citizenship and be part of something bigger than themselves. And when you come together with like-minded people or unlike-minded people, but to actually have a respectful dialogue, you can make some great things happen.
And to your point about, people don't know that these organizations are out there, something that I want to invest in is amplifying not just the great programming that I think we're delivering to the community, and not just expanding that reach to connect to other communities. We're looking both within the Gulf Coast of Florida, we're even looking beyond the state of Florida to grow Conversations Across the Aisle. But we recently launched a website, and that website is always going to prominently promote not only our own programming, but also the programs that are coming. Braver Angels is doing an in-person event in Bradenton. You'll find that event is on our website. It's not our event, but it's our mission, and we want to support that. And I think that to the extent that we can help people discover these different resources, these different assets, whether it's Braver Angels, whether it's builders, whether it's smart politics, whether it's Conversations Across the Aisle, I think we should all be lifting each other up and help
Yeah.
people find these resources, these assets. We're primarily in person. I know Braver Angels is shifting from their kind of COVID-driven virtual model to get back in person as well. We hope you can be a part of your in-person programming. We actually are planning to leverage and amplify as we're growing into Venice, Florida, which is about 40 minutes south of Sarasota. One of the first things that the team there wants to do is to do a reprise of I think it's Disagreeing Better. We're going to basically borrow your curriculum and bring that in person to Venice, because Venice is kind of a desert for this kind of work, and we need to keep spreading the good word that there's a different way to approach our political differences.
Yeah, that's right. There's a better way to engage. That's one of the things that I've been saying for a long time. You know what, Bill, our time here has flown by today. It's been an incredible conversation. People can find out more about you at cataproject.org, right?
Yes.
CATA project.org. And Bill, it's been a fantastic conversation. I see many more conversations in our future. I do appreciate your time, and please come back.
I look forward to it, Wilk. Thanks for having me on.
Friends, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to get the Derate The Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. We really are better together, so please take a moment to visit braverangels.org and consider joining the movement towards civic renewal and bridging our political divides. This is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make every day the day that you want it to be. With that, my friends, I'm going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.